Clara Holt had learned that grief was not a river you crossed. It was a desert you learned to live in. 2 years had passed since the telegram came. 3 lines printed in neat, indifferent ink, informing her that Corporal Rafe Calloway had been killed at the Battle of Cimarron Ridge. 3 lines to end 7 years of a man. She had folded that paper so many times the creases had gone white, until one morning she simply stopped unfolding it. Dry Creek, Texas, 1869. The town had grown since the war. A new general store, a second saloon, a barber who wore a silk vest and charged 2 bits for a shave. Clara ran the only boarding house in 40 miles, a 2-story building of weathered pine and stubborn roses that climbed the porch rail no matter what the summer did to them. She had a rhythm now: dawn, coffee and ledger. Morning, rooms and laundry. Afternoon, the garden, where she could be alone without feeling lonely. Evening, supper for whoever sat at her table, drifters, cattle hands, the occasional circuit preacher. She was not happy, but she was no longer broken. There is a difference, and Clara Holt had learned exactly where the line was. She had even let Henry Alderman, the land surveyor with kind eyes and steady hands, take her to Sunday supper twice. He had not pressed for more. She liked that about him. On the evening of October the 3rd, Clara was pinning laundry to the line behind the house when she heard the horse. She didn't look up. Horses came and went in Dry Creek, but something in the cadence of those hooves, slow, deliberate, like a man trying to arrive quietly, made her fingers stop on the clothespin. She looked toward the road. The rider was silhouetted against a sky going blood orange at the edges, the kind of sunset that makes the whole world look like it's already on fire. He was lean and trail-worn, hat low, coat the color of dried earth. She couldn't see his face, but she recognized the way he sat a horse, like he owned the ground beneath it and was just being polite about it. Clara's hand found the fence post beside her. "No," she said quietly, "to no one. To God, to whatever cruelty governed coincidence." The rider turned into her lane. His name was Rafe Calloway, and he was supposed to be dead. He dismounted at her gate the way a man does when he's not sure of his welcome. Slowly, keeping his hands where they could be seen, he tied the reins to the post. He took off his hat. In the 2 years since she'd last seen him, 3 days before he rode to war, age had done its work. There were lines at his eyes that hadn't been there before. A scar along his jaw, thin and white as a seam in old leather. His hair was longer, and the gray that used to only touch his temples had spread. But it was him. Lord help her, it was him. Clara. His voice was the same, low and certain, like a hand placed flat on a table. She did not move from where she stood, 10 feet away, a white sheet still hanging between them on the line. "They told me you were dead," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I know, I mourned you, Rafe. I know that too." "Then why?" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "Start again. Why are you standing at my gate?" He looked down at his hat, turned the brim once in his hands. When he looked back up, there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before, not the old confidence. Something rawer, something cornered. "I'm in trouble, Clara." She laughed. A short, humorless sound. "Of course you are." He glanced back toward the road, a quick, practiced scan. "Can we go inside?" She studied him for a long moment. The roses on the porch had gone rust-colored in the evening light. Somewhere down the street, a piano in the saloon was playing something she didn't know the name of. She turned without a word and walked up the porch steps. She left the door open. Inside, she set a lamp on the table and turned to face him, arms crossed. He told her a version of it, she knew. The way men always told a version. He'd been captured at Cimarron Ridge, not killed, held for 8 months in a Confederate prison camp in the mountains. By the time he'd walked out, half-starved, barely recognizable. The war was ending and the army had already closed the book on him. "And you didn't write," she said. "No, you didn't send word, no, for 2 years. He set his hat on the table. "There were reasons, I'd like to hear them." He pulled out a chair and sat, not with permission, just with exhaustion, like a man whose body had made the decision before his manners could. "After the camp, I went west. Crossed into New Mexico territory. I fell in with a man named Darrow. Cole Darrow. You've maybe heard the name." She had, everyone in the territory had. Cole Darrow ran cattle, legally, and men, illegally. Half the judges in the region owed him money or worse. I did work for him, Rafe said. I'm not proud of what kind. Clara said nothing, she let the silence do the asking. I rode with his outfit for 14 months, collected debts, moved things across borders that weren't meant to move. Kept men in line who didn't want to be kept. He looked at his hands on the table. I told myself I had nothing left to come back to, that you'd moved on, that it was better for you if I stayed gone, and now? Now Darrow thinks I know something I shouldn't. Which I do. He reached inside his coat and laid a small leather journal on the table between them. Names. Payments, judges, sheriffs, senators, everything he's bought and everyone he's buried. I took this 3 weeks ago and I've been running since. Clara stared at the journal. It looked ordinary, brown, worn at the corners. It looked like nothing. It looked like the kind of thing men died over. He'll send men, Rafe said. He always does. How close? He looked toward the window, closer than I'd like. She walked to the window and looked out at the dark street. The piano in the saloon had stopped. A dog barked twice and went quiet. She thought about Henry Alderman and his kind eyes and his steady hands. She thought about 2 years of learning to sleep alone again. She thought about the folded telegram with the white creases. You have tonight, she said, turning from the window. One night. In the morning, you ride out, with or without whatever you came here for. I came here for you. I know, she said, that's the problem. She gave him the room at the end of the hall, her last empty one, and went to bed in her own room, with the door bolted, and her father's old Colt on the nightstand. She didn't sleep. At some hour past midnight she heard him in the hall, pacing, the floorboards making their small complaints. She knew his insomnia. She'd spent a year of nights listening to it before the war. Around 2 in the morning she unbolted the door and stepped into the hall. He was sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, knees up, head back. He opened his eyes when he heard her. You never did sleep straight through, she said. No. She sat down across from him, on the other side of the narrow hall. Pulled her knees up the same way. They looked at each other in the dark without the armor of daylight or anger between them. Were you ever going to come back? She asked. Before the trouble. He was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Every day for 2 years I told myself I would, he said. And every morning I woke up still gone. Why? Because I knew you'd be better off. A pause. And because I was afraid you'd already found that out. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. That was the cruelty of it. He had always been most honest when it was least useful. There's a man, she said. Henry, he's decent, good. Don't say, good, like you mean it. He almost smiled. Even in the dark she could see it, the one-sided thing that used to drive her half to madness. I don't, he admitted. But it's what I ought to mean. She looked at her hands in her lap. I hate that you did this, Rafe. Came back like this. With danger on your heels and that look on your face that makes it hard to remember how angry I am, I know. If men come, they won't touch you, I'll be gone before. If men come, she said again firmly, I can handle a rifle, my father made sure of that. He looked at her for a long moment. I know that too, he said quietly. She stood. Get some sleep. She paused at her door. Breakfast is at 6. You're not leaving on an empty stomach. She went back inside and lay in the dark and listened to the desert breathe through the window screen, and she thought, this is the most alive I have felt in 2 years. She hated herself for it. She held on to it anyway. Clara was at the stove when she heard the horses. Not 1 this time but 4, maybe 5. Moving fast up the main road and slowing as they reached her lane. She turned the burner down and moved to the front window, without making a sound. 5 men. Hard-faced, trail dirty, armed the way men are armed, when they expect to use what they're carrying. The one in the front had a deputy's star pinned to his coat. The fake kind, the kind Darrow's men wore to cross state lines without questions. She went to the bottom of the stairs and called up in a low, even voice. Rafe. He was already at the top, fully dressed, rifle in hand. He had slept in his boots. She wondered if he had slept at all. 5, she said. The one with the badge is a fraud. He came down the stairs and looked out the side window, staying back from the glass. His jaw tightened. The big one on the gray horse, that's Vic Tolland, Darrow's head man. A beat. He's good. Better than you? Ask me after. A knock at the door. 3 heavy blows. Clara straightened her apron, tucked a loose strand of hair, and opened the door. The man with the badge stood on her porch, with the pleasant expression of someone who has learned to appear reasonable at short distances. He was large, wide through the chest, with small pale eyes that moved around her like they were cataloging everything and assigning it a price. "Morning, ma'am, sorry to disturb. Name's Doyle, deputy out of Laredo." Everything about the name was a lie. "We're tracking a fugitive. Man named Calloway, Rafe Calloway. Wanted on charges of theft and assault. We have information he may have passed through your establishment." "I run a boarding house," Clara said. "Lots of men pass through." "Yes, ma'am. This one would have arrived yesterday evening. Riding a brown gelding, trail coat, scar on his jaw." Behind her, she heard nothing. Rafe was good at that, at going still and silent. He'd learned it somewhere she hadn't been. "I had a man come in yesterday," she said. "Paid for a room, left before first light. Heading north, I think, said something about Abilene." Tolland's small eyes studied her. She held his gaze with the practiced calm of a woman who has dealt with difficult men at her supper table for 2 years. "You wouldn't mind if we looked around," he said. It was not a question. "I'd mind very much," she said pleasantly. "I have guests sleeping. You're welcome to wait in the yard while I send a boy to fetch Sheriff Briggs. He'll want to know there are deputies in his jurisdiction who haven't introduced themselves." She paused. "Unless you'd rather come back with proper papers." The mention of the real sheriff, a man Darrow did not own, did something small and careful to Tolland's expression. "That won't be necessary, ma'am." He touched his hat. "If you see Calloway, you'd do well to send word to the county office." He turned back to his horse. Clara closed the door. She let out a breath that had taken 30 seconds to hold. Rafe stepped out of the kitchen doorway, where he'd stood in shadow. He looked at her with something she didn't quite have a word for. "That won't hold them long," she said. "No," he agreed. "But it bought us time." "How much?" "Enough to do this right." He told her the plan while she made coffee she didn't taste. There was a man in town, Judge Aldous Crew, the federal circuit judge, who came through Dry Creek every 3rd month. He was due today, as it happened. An appointment with whatever God-controlled timing. Rafe had stayed away from federal men, because Darrow owned most of the ones he'd encountered. But Crew was different. Old enough to be past corruption, ornery enough to be past fear. "If I hand him this journal in person," Rafe said, tapping the leather cover on the table, "in front of witnesses, with a signed account of everything I know, it's done. Darrow can't bury it, can't buy it back, and Tolland will try to stop me before I get there." Clara looked at the journal, at Rafe, at the window where the morning was coming up gold and merciless. "Then we go together," she said. "Clara, you walk in alone, they take you in the street before you reach the courthouse steps." She stood and went to the hook by the door and lifted her father's rifle. A Winchester, oiled, and ready. "I grew up in this town, every soul on that main street knows my face." She checked the chamber with practiced ease. "They won't shoot a woman in front of witnesses. And if I'm beside you, you're harder to take quietly." He looked at her for a long time. "All right," he said. They walked down the main street of Dry Creek at 8 in the morning, side by side, Clara, with the Winchester, and Rafe, with the journal tucked inside his coat. The town was awake. A few men on the general store porch, a woman hanging laundry, the livery hand watering horses at the trough. Each one looked. None of them looked away. Tolland's men were spread out. One by the barber shop, one at the far end near the saloon, 2 more she couldn't see, but could feel. She could feel them the way you feel weather coming, that pressure in the air, before a storm decides to be honest. The courthouse was at the far end of the street. 60 yards. They were 40 yards out when Tolland stepped from between 2 buildings directly into their path. He had his gun drawn. He had not bothered with the deputy's star this time. "End of the road, Calloway," he said. Rafe stopped. Clara stopped at his shoulder. The street went quiet the way streets go quiet when something is about to happen. A held breath that belongs to everyone. The men on the porch stood up. a woman pulled her child into a doorway. Somewhere, a horse shifted its weight and its shoes rang once on the packed earth like a single struck note. Rafe reached inside his coat, slowly, 2 fingers only, and drew out the journal. He held it up so Toland could see it clearly. "Everything Darrow's done is in here, Vic," his voice was quiet and carried to every edge of that silent street. "Kill me, and it still gets to Crew. Clara makes sure of it, kill her and the whole town saw it happen." He let that sit for a moment. "It's over, the only question is how it ends for you." Toland's pale eyes moved between Rafe and Clara and the journal, running calculations Clara could almost see. "Drop the rifle," he said to Clara. "No," she said. Something shifted behind Toland's expression. Some number coming back wrong. His men were positioned, yes. But the street was full of witnesses. A federal judge was 40 yards away. The whole careful architecture of Cole Darrow's operation rested on things happening quietly. In private, with no one watching. This was the opposite of that. Rafe looked at Toland for a long, steady moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, with the full weight of intention, he unholstered his own gun, and bent down and set it in the dust of the street. He stood back up with his hands empty, and his eyes level. The gesture was so unexpected that Toland actually took half a step back. It was not the move of a cornered man. It was not the move of a man surrendering. It was the move of a man who has made a decision that cannot be unmade, and knows it, and is at peace with it. "I'm done running," Rafe said. Quiet, certain. The voice of a man who has finally stopped arguing with himself. "I'm done fighting. Whatever comes next, it comes in front of witnesses, in front of a judge, with everything written down and signed." He took one step toward Toland. "If you shoot me now, every person on this street knows what you are, and they know who sent you." Toland's gun was still raised. 5 seconds. 10, 15 from the far end of the street came the sound of a door opening. Judge Aldous Crew, 70 years old, white-whiskered, built like a man who had been arguing with the frontier for 5 decades and winning, stepped onto the courthouse steps and looked down the length of Dry Creek's main street at all of it. At Toland's drawn gun, at Rafe's weapon in the dust, at Clara with her Winchester, at the watching town. His voice, when it came, was the kind that didn't need to be raised. "Someone want to explain what I'm looking at?" Toland's gun came down. On both sides of the street, one by one, so did the others. It took 3 hours in the courthouse, and another 2 days before federal marshals arrived. Real ones, out of Fort Worth, with sealed papers and a warrant for Cole Darrow's arrest. Rafe gave his full account. Judge Crew read the journal twice, cover to cover, in a silence that was itself a kind of verdict. Clara sat in the gallery and watched Rafe speak with the same steadiness he'd shown in the street, and she thought about the man he had been before the war. And the man he was now, and the distance between them was great. But not, she decided quietly, impassable. Toland and his men were held in the town jail on the west end of Maine. 2 of them turned evidence against Darrow before the week was out. Cole Darrow himself was arrested at his ranch in New Mexico the following Thursday. Clara reads about it in the newspaper she took with her morning coffee, sitting on her porch in the October cool, the rust-colored roses pressing against the rail beside her. Rafe came to find her there. He sat in the other chair, the one she usually kept empty, or occasionally for Henry, who had heard the full story of the week's events, and had come by once, asked with genuine kindness if she was all right, and left with a grace that told her he was a better man than the situation required of him. She was grateful for that. "I'll be moving on," Rafe said. Clara looked at the roses. "When?" "End of the week. There's a hearing in Fort Worth. They'll want testimony." A pause. After that, she said, "you could stay." Silence settled between them, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that has room in it. "I'm not the same man you knew," he said. "No," she agreed. "I'm not the same woman either." She looked at him directly. "I don't know if what's left between us is enough. I don't know if I can forgive everything, or how long that takes. I don't know if you're capable of being ordinary, of staying put and fixing fences and sitting on a porch without watching the road." She paused. "But I spent 2 years learning to live without you, and I'd like some time to find out whether I have to." The morning was bright and cool, the kind that makes the desert look like it was designed to be beautiful rather than survived. "I'm not easy to live with," he said. "I know, I'll probably be restless. I have rooms to let. Restless men are my business." He almost smiled, the one-sided thing. She had missed it more than she'd ever been willing to say it out loud. "I'll stay through the week," he said. "We'll see what comes after, that's all I'm asking," she said. She poured him a cup of coffee, from the pot on the step between them, and handed it across. And they sat in the morning quiet of Dry Creek, Texas, and watched the light come full and even over the main street, and the dust, and the stubborn roses, and all the ordinary irreplaceable things that make up a life. A month later, Clara was in the garden when she heard him on the porch. His particular footfall, the unhurried and deliberate weight of it. She had come to know it again, the way you relearn a song you thought you'd forgotten. The notes are the same, the meaning has changed. You play it differently now, and it is better for the difference. He had stayed. Not announced it, not made a declaration about it. He had simply not left at the end of the week, and then not left at the end of the month, and somewhere in between those two absences he had repaired the fence along the south side of the property, without being asked, and was asking her. Each morning, what else needed doing? It was not romantic, exactly. It was something quieter and more durable than romance, the renegotiation of two people finding out what remains, when everything else has been burned away and the smoke has cleared. She was not certain of him. That was the truth, and she kept it plainly. She was not certain she ever fully would be. But uncertainty, she had learned, was not the same as hopelessness. She had confused them once, in the worst months of her grief. She would not confuse them again. Letter came, he said from the porch. She looked up from the turned earth. He was holding an envelope. Official, bearing a federal seal. The hearing? Next month, Fort Worth. He paused. "I'll need to go, I know. I'll come back." She looked at him across the garden, across the distance of turned soil, and stubborn green things she'd coaxed out of desert ground, and all the years between then and now, and she thought, "I believe you not because belief is certainty, because some things worth keeping are worth the risks of being wrong about." "I know that too," she said. She went back to her garden, above the dry town of Dry Creek. The sky held the impossible blue it only reaches in October, when the heat has finally decided to release its grip, and the air comes off the mountains, clean and cold and new, and the whole world carries the smell of something that has survived whatever was done to it and come through, battered, altered, honest, into something you might, if you were careful with the word, call peace. The roses had gone to their last bloom of the season, red at the edges, almost amber at the heart. Clara knelt in the dirt and worked with her hands and did not feel alone. End. Word count. 4, 100 words, 8 scenes, genre, Wild West drama suspense.